Hi, welcome to the Dakota Prepper. There is no question that we are living in a different world than we were just a few short years ago. There's a lot of signs and a lot of stuff going on that we need to talk about to make sure that as preppers, we are doing our jobs to keep our families safe and prepared for just about anything to have our best chance of survival and overcoming all obstacles. There are many factors that have changed the world for what I fear is forever. Throughout the week, I always hear people saying, I can't wait until we get back to normal. Well, guess what, Karen? Let me be the one to burst your bubble. There is no going back to normal. We are changed forever. The world will never be what 2018 or 2019 was. It's just different now. There's been too much freedoms given up that will never come back. Other countries are on crazy lockdowns like Australia. I mean, it's like a prison over there. It is crazy right now. It's now up to us, each of us, to adapt and learn how to prep and take care of our families in this new time, this new age, this strange new world we find ourselves living in right now. In fact, I believe it is even more important to be a prepper right now. And if you know people that aren't prepping, you really need to talk to them about starting at least a basic food stash and water. I mean, just the basics would be great. And hey, if this is your first time entering the world of prepping, welcome. I hope you find answers you need here on my channel. That's the whole goal. Let me start with a little bit about myself. I grew up here in the Black Hills of South Dakota, where I still live today. After high school, however, I joined the Air Force, and I served this great country that I love for 9 years, and I loved every minute of it. During that time, I made so many friends from so many different parts of the world that I feel like I have a really good worldwide network for information, and I feel like that's going to help me be able to share things with you using perspectives from different countries from people I know that live there. After I got out of the military, I became a tattoo artist, which is what I still do today. I've been a tattoo artist for 21 years now. God, I can't believe I've been out of the military for 21 years already. Doesn't feel like it. Being a tattoo artist does give me a pretty good sense of financial security, and it definitely gives me the time to putting in the effort to being the prepper I want to be, which is a guy who is ready for just about anything, I hope. Now, don't get me wrong, I am not a doomsday prepper. I don't think the world is going to end tomorrow. I don't. But I do believe it is our responsibilities to be prepared for just about any SHTF situation which may arise in our life. I mean, that is what our forefathers did. I mean, they would spend all their waking hours preparing for winter, for harsh weather, for work the next day, whatever needed to be done to be prepared, they were doing. And we've lost that in a sense. Everybody's heads are stuck in cell phones and video games these days, and I get it. It's a wonderful distraction from this world, but when shit hits the fan, you better be ready. And video games, while you may be badass in those, are no substitute for knowing how to properly handle an AR-15 or a sidearm or a knife, or even how to triage wounds in the field. That's even assuming that it becomes a violent situation in the future. If there's no violence, then you have to know how to farm and how to live off the land, and skills that a lot of people don't have these days. But here in the hills, we still hunt and fish, and we still know how to do all that old country boy stuff. So that's what I love about this part of the country. Another thing that being a tattoo artist does is it allows me to grow my network locally, because I tattoo police officers, lawyers, doctors, nurses, military, outlaws, thugs, drug dealers, scumbags, and everybody in between. That advantage is a keen insight into my local area, which helps me maintain kind of my gray man status. I'm heavily tattooed, so it is hard to be gray man of any sorts, but this whole area is heavily tattooed and full of bikers and military, so I feel like I blend right in, and country boys. So kind of hard not to blend in as long as you got a beard and some kind of country shirt and a Smith & Wesson hat. Just kidding. I do like my outfit today, though. Over time, I have been able to acquire a nice little stockpile of supplies, but it is always being cultivated and rotated and maintained. You know, things do expire even if they have long-term shelf life, so you got to kind of rotate stuff through there every once in a while. And that's one of my biggest pieces of advice for people, is to prep the things you already use. If a lot of your recipes have mustard, prep mustard, because you obviously like it, you use it a lot. Now, none of us can predict the future, but we can take a look at our local government and our local politicians' comments, and we can kind of judge based off those where things are going, making somewhat of an educated guess. There does seem to be a growing percentage in the world that would like to see America knocked off the top perch as number one dog in the world. If we lose the US dollar as the reserve currency, we won't be number one anymore. In fact, I feel like a lot of the world already kind of looks at us as no longer number one and on the verge of decline. I have friends, like I've said, all over the world. I get stories from the Australian news and German news and British news sent to me from these friends, and they are all talking about how America is, imminent decline. That we're on the verge of just crumbling as a nation. Now, I don't think that's true. I mean, we have some problems. There's no doubt about that. We got stuff we need to work out, for sure. But we have faced adversity before. And one thing about the American people, even though we seem to not be able to elect very good leaders, or there just aren't good leaders anymore, and we need to reassess where these leaders come from. But I don't think the U.S. is going to go away. We may not be top dog, we may have to lick our wounds for a while, but it doesn't mean we won't be making the efforts to get back there, I think our days of policing the world need to end. I don't think we need to get involved in other countries' political problems. We need to let other countries handle their own stuff. We tried too long to help other people, and some people don't want to be helped. They want to give their country right back to the Taliban. So that is what happened. I got friends that lost limbs in Afghanistan, and it sucks what happened. How we just threw away 20 years and thousands of lives, and trillions of dollars. It's crap. There are a few reasons that I personally am worried about our country, and let's talk about those now. Saudi Arabia has recently signed a deal with Russia to develop a joint military effort. Now, that may not seem like a big deal to you, but there was a time when Saudi Arabia was one of our best allies. This is a definite shift, and it is not in the favor of the U.S. Foreign countries are building bigger and bigger militaries, while the U.S. still outspends every other country. Countries such as China, Russia, India, and Japan have increased their budgets drastically. China's building a ship that's like a mile long, I heard. Like, it's supposed to be insane. What is everybody building their armies for? Are they worried about threats in their area, or are they gearing up for something else? Who knows? The third thing that has me concerned is that our once close allies are not necessarily very close anymore. Our president's recent blunders in Afghanistan have certainly not helped. I do believe that we still have allies strong enough that if there was an attack on America, I believe we would have help. I don't believe the whole world would sit and watch America burn. I certainly hope that is not true anyway, for all we've done for other countries. So, none of this that I've talked about is too far out of the realm of possibility. So as preppers, what do we need to consider? Well, the common sense approach would be to prepare a plan for each scenario that we think we could face in whatever local area we live. I live in the Great Plains, western South Dakota, and the Black Hills, like I mentioned before. In our area, the biggest threat I could ever think of is like the supervolcano in Yellowstone. We would pretty much be toast right away though, so that's really nothing to worry about prepping for, because if it erupts, I'm probably not even going to know it erupted. I'm just going to be gone. We do have old nuclear missile silos all around the area, and who knows if any of them are still active. Government isn't always honest about everything, we know that. So I think it's pretty safe to assume that the best laid plan is always to bug in at our house until it is unsafe to do that. And then that is when you would want to bug out. I can't think of a scenario where I would choose to bug out instantly and leave most of my preps behind at my house, because you're not going to be able to carry everything, and you're not going to be able to load it all up in your truck and drive off unless you live somewhere really remote and nobody's going to see you doing it. If we are bugging in, then we already kind of have shelter in place. Cover is very important. Shelter, cover, because you can die from exposure very quickly. So having a place to hunker down, stay warm, stay safe is probably the number one thing to be concerned about first, is your cover. The second thing would be water, because we can only live 7 days without water. So exposure will kill you faster than dehydration, but you do have to worry about water second. So once you know your shelter is secure, then you move on to collecting water. And while you're collecting water, you can also be looking to collect food. And hopefully you have good preps and stores of these things so that if something happens and you have to say, barricade your door and stay quiet and stay in your house until whatever situation happens is over, you could do it for months if you could. That should be your goal. It is like 3 months starting on your preps. Once you get to 3 months, push it to 6 months. Once you get it to 6 months, push it to a year and just keep building. But always keeping the freshest stuff rotating, you know? You got to rotate it so that it doesn't expire down the road or whatever. Now, of course, you get the dehydrated things that are sit on your shelf for 15 years. You can put them on your shelf and then not worry about them for 14 years probably. So, if that's your option, but many of us don't want to live off dehydrated food unless things get so bad that that is the only option left, right? Most of us are going to be trying to eat good as long as we can and healthy and everything else. So when we're talking about water, what are we worried about? Well, we're worried about contamination. We are worried about obtaining enough water for each member of our family. Each person needs roughly a gallon a day for consumption, hygiene. What do you have as a means to disinfect your water? Are you going to boil it? Are you going to use bleach? Are you going to use iodine? Are you going to use something like a Berkey filtration system? You could use a Sawyer Mini or a Life Straw. So what sources do we have to consider? Hopefully you have some good local water sources. Moving water is always better, so rivers, creeks, those sort of things, because it's just keeping stuff moving and it's not building up sediment. And lakes and ponds and stuff like that are probably not as good, but the water can be treated, and if the source running into the lake is fresh, then there's always a good chance that the lake water is pretty safe. But you are going to get a bacteria buildup quicker in a lake or a pond, so be extra careful that way. One of the things you can do if you have the space and the means is you can build a rain catchment system, which will catch any rain from your gutter and pour it into, say, like a 55-gallon drum. Okay, we have invested our hard-earned money and we have ourselves a nice stockpile of goods, water, food, medical. Oh, don't forget TP. You gotta have lots of TP. Remember the TP? Now, what is going to happen when the rest of society starts going without? You better hope they don't learn that you have stuff and that you've been preparing for just that situation to arise. Because when people go without and they find out somebody else has it, they're going to try and come and take it. And that is where security comes into play in the equation for prepping. You don't need to be a gun nut. If guns aren't your thing, that's fine. There are other means of self-defense, you know. Billy clubs are a good deterrent. Bear spray. There is even home defense spray that looks much like a bear spray canister, but it has stuff that is more meant to irritate the human eyes and the human senses. So I recommend that. Just make sure if you do deploy such a thing that you are not deploying it into the wind where it will blow right back in your face and incapacitate you. Okay? That's very important. If you use something like spray, like a mace, you have to be able to know that you're spraying it downwind, or it's just going to make a bad situation worse for yourself and anybody you love. Now remember, sprays in those are only a deterrent so that you can either subdue the assailant or get away. So you have to make that choice too. You have to decide what you are willing to do to protect your family and your property. Some people, there's no question, they'll go all the way, and they're prepared for such a thing, and they train for such a thing. That's where gun ranges and repetition and practice come into play. If you are considering getting a weapon for protection and you do not have a weapon yet, I highly recommend you find a local gun range or gun instructor and take a basics course. You will be way better off knowing how to safely handle a firearm than trying to figure it out yourself at some backcountry range. Now, if you have a friend who is a gun person and you trust them and the knowledge they possess, then they can train you as well. Some people find that more comfortable. Some people like classes though, so whatever works, right? Do whatever you need to do. That's what I always say. Whatever you need to be proficient. So weapon types, if you're thinking of home defense, my first recommendation is always a shotgun, a nice 12 gauge, nice widespread pattern of buckshot. There's something about the cocking of a shotgun that gets people's attention, I guess. So after that, you'd look at your AR type rifles. Of course, long rifles aren't the greatest indoor weapons, tight quarters and stuff. I think you're better off with a shotgun or a handgun in that scenario. But if you have a ranch and you have property, then an AR could definitely come into play if you have a perimeter to defend, so to speak. So all about situational awareness and what you need, what tools you need to get the job done. Now, owning weapons is one thing. It's great if you own them and you have a nice stockpile of ammo, both defensive ammo and regular ammunition just for target practice and whatnot. But you got to know how to use them. You got to know how to maintain them, and you need to teach anybody else in your network that's going to have access to these firearms how to do the same. A gun is no good if it malfunctions in the middle of a firefight because somebody didn't maintain it properly. That is a quick way to Deadville, right? So we have our security now in place, and we have all of our preps in place. So what is important now is that everybody in the group or the family knows the plan. What is the plan? If something happens and we are split up as a family, who is going to get the kids? This needs to be determined ahead of time. Is mom going to get the kids while dad goes home and starts getting things prepared, to go if they have to go? Is there going to be a rendezvous point that you guys all need to know about? What if the kids are at soccer practice, but they can't stay where soccer practice is because of whatever the situation is? There needs to be a rendezvous point that everybody knows how to get to, and that would be where everybody meets. That's important. That's definitely got to be part of your plan. But do remember that if you decide to leave your home, you're likely going to have to leave many of your preps behind. And I don't recommend bugging out unless it's absolutely necessary. Bugging in should always be the first option. We know the world is getting scarier. Things that used to be normal are no longer guaranteed. The food supply has been disrupted. We are facing a potential worldwide food shortage in the next 6 months alone. Hospitals are overflowing with sick people still. Many people who were once out of work are now having to scramble to find jobs because the Unemployment Aid Act expired yesterday morning. 7 million people now have to go find jobs because there is no more unemployment benefits for them. And that's going to cause chaos in job markets and employment places with this massive influx of new people that are going to have to be trained. So there's going to be some adjustment again, for sure. We're dealing with different variants. We may be dealing with different variants for the rest of our lives. So it's something we all just have to adapt and help each other. And I know it's hard. I do. I get it. I'm just as frustrated as other people on an almost daily basis. But remember, desperate people will have no problem breaking the law to feed their babies. So let's hope it doesn't get to that, right? I really hope this video helped some of you. I hope it helped you consider some things that maybe you need to start preparing. This will be the first of many videos on my channel here. I welcome you all to the Dakota Prepper. I hope you subscribe and hit that bell notification so that you can be notified when I upload more content. Thank you for stopping by, and I hope you and yours are safe and prepared for anything.